The panic began slowly, with shoppers looking for face masks and hand sanitizer. But it hit a fever pitch over the weekend as crowds descended on supermarkets and big box stores, snapping up cleaning supplies, toilet paper, and non-perishable foods to prepare for the coronavirus. "It's gotten crazier by the day," said a Target employee. "A lot of it is obviously panic buying. People stocking up on 8 gallons of water or 20 different kinds of soup. Items are selling out immediately as soon as they go up on the shelves." Thus began a Wall Street Journal article that I read today about how we are responding to the onset of the COVID-19 virus. This article was reporting from the Northeast, but we should make no mistake, this sort of feeling exists right here in our community too. Last weekend, my husband went to Costco to pick up the locks we love. Costco has the best locks. If you don't know this, you should. It's amazing. And while there, he reported that he was nearly run over with folks running in a frenzied state toward the aisle with the bulk-size Purell. It's scary stuff. Confusing too, I think. It's all over the news, and it makes words like pandemic, epidemic, quarantine common in our daily discourse. And it's stoked fear everywhere and in everyone. It's hard to know what's real and what's not about COVID-19, what to believe and what to set aside, as the information really varies based on the source. Our executive director and I had the opportunity to speak with one of the lead infectious disease doctors at Northwestern this morning, and he shared with us that what makes COVID-19 seem so different from any other contagious virus, from H1N1 or SARS, or even just from the flu, is not really much scientific, but rather, first, the exponentially larger attention it's getting because of social media and our 24-hour news stream, and second, how COVID-19 has been leveraged as a political tool on all sides, not just here in the US, but around the globe. And the effects of this are notable. On the one hand, we become concerned for ourselves and our loved ones. And as such, we want to make sure we're prepared and safe. And this is a good thing. If in our physical response there is a growth in consciousness about hygiene and self-care, then hey, that's a win. And it will likely help limit the potential impact of this virus and slow or even stop its further spread. But on the other hand, I want to share with you that I do worry about a different powerful contagion at play with this virus, that of the nature of our emotional responses, how our proclivity toward panic can obscure or worse, blind us to our otherwise more elevated core values. Consider the following from Stephen Taylor. He's the author of The Psychology of Pandemics, and he studies the communal psychological and behavioral responses after viral outbreaks. He writes, "During the SARS outbreak, even survivors afterwards were discriminated against and shunned, even though they had recovered. It's as if they were perpetually tainted. Healthcare workers, hospital workers were shunned in their communities. There were reports of healthcare workers being told that their children were not welcome back into kindergarten because their parents had worked with SARS patients in hospitals. All of this was driven by fear, and it tore the fabric of many of these communities to bits. When we are frightened, we tend to have laser-sharp focus on our own needs, but we often forget or choose to ignore the fact that as a community, we still need each other. No one should be forgotten or pushed aside." So what are we to do about this? I think instead of looking first to the latest clickbait on your screen, perhaps we might start with Torah. and an incredible teaching about how our ancestors handled situations like the one in which we find ourselves, but long before the potential of modern medicine ever existed. As described in the book of Leviticus, when a person contracted or was even suspected of having a highly contagious illness, there was a mandatory period of quarantine where they were sent to live alone on the outskirts of the town, no exceptions. And should an otherwise healthy person happen to come near the quarantined area, the sufferer was commanded to call out the words, "Tameh, tameh," I'm impure, I'm impure. First and foremost, we imagine this was not to put the passerbys at risk, clearly stressing the value of life, health, and safety for the broader community. But the Talmud adds a different layer onto this Torah teaching, asserting that in addition to reminding the passerby of the quarantine in order to protect the rest of society, the person's calling out of the words tameh, tameh was also to remind the passerbys, those not yet inflicted, that the inflicted was still there, isolated, and still very much vulnerable and at risk. And in doing so, those who were healthy were invited to reframe their encounter from one of fear to one of empathy, from one of separation to one of responsible connectivity. And in doing this, it helped to make it possible for the community to come back together as one healed and whole after the time of contagion had passed. The truth is, beyond taking care of ourselves and following prescribed guidelines, there is not much we can control about the spread of the coronavirus. But we must remember that we very much can control how we choose to respond as a community, in particular with those who are most impacted. We are always responsible for our own actions, and we don't get to throw away our moral compasses or our moral responsibilities because of fear. At times like this, our first instinct might be to focus on ourselves and our own needs. There's nothing wrong with that. But as is so often the case in Judaism, we must consider too the needs of those around us, not just those with whom we are closest, but the larger community as well. Thankfully, no one on the North Shore has yet been diagnosed with the COVID-19 virus. This is a blessing. And yet, so many are already being impacted by the reality of COVID-19, directly and indirectly. There have been layoffs and freezes. Families who plan to travel to Israel for B'nai Mitzvah have had to cancel those trips. Those who work in healthcare and in other high-risk environments are rightfully on edge. And any number of our loved ones and community members with compromised health are already staying home to try to prevent exposure. Just to name a few ways that this is already impacting our community. Of course, we need to continue to take care of ourselves for our own sakes and for the sakes of others who are vulnerable. I was told today by the infectious disease physician that we should behave in ways that are consistent with how we would act with any other respiratory infection. What this means is if we aren't feeling well, stay home. If you want to be with us at services, we are blessed that we can stream our services. And in some respects, people prefer to stream the services anyway. You can wear shorts, have a snack, do what you want. But you can be with us. Additionally, if you want to stream and feel a sense of community, stream our services on Facebook, where you can literally be in communication with a whole bunch of other folks who are streaming as well. We don't want you to be in danger, and we know you don't want to endanger anybody else. If you have to cough, you know this, cough into a tissue or into your elbow. Wash your hands a lot. Honor the fact that some people may be comfortable shaking hands or hugging, but others may not. This is not a time for judgment of others' actions. It's a time for understanding and empathy. We need to honor each other's boundaries, and figure out the best ways to add comfort, not push each other further away. But more, bless you. Good sneezing, Molly. But more than these ubiquitous preventative steps, we can actually be proactive in providing support and comfort for one another. Our tradition teaches us to care for one another at all times, but in particular in times of need, and even to reach out in anticipation of another's need. Now is the time to check in on those around us who are vulnerable. As Purim is approaching on Tuesday night, I want to remind you of two commandments associated with the holiday that couldn't be better timed. The first is matanot le'evyonim, gifts to the poor, the command to give extra charity to those in need who don't have the security of a community or neighbors to care for them, those who are likely to be most affected at times such as these. The second is mishloach manot, the command to give friends food, essentially care packages, as a way to show we're thinking of each other and that we care. Why not take the opportunity to think of some people you know or have heard are isolated or vulnerable and drop a little something off to them? Additionally, in this same spirit, you can join us here at NSCI on Sunday the 15th at 9 a.m. to help us prepare meals that we'll be able to deliver to community members who find themselves shut in. Look for more information about that on our Facebook page and the e-blast next week. Each and all of these efforts help strengthen the fabric of our community, reminding us that we care and are cared for. The Shabbat before Purim is a special one this night, known as Shabbat Zachor, the Shabbat of Remembrance. So named because of the special reading from the Torah enjoining us to remember what was done to us as we left Egypt by the hands of Amalek, from whom Haman is said to descend. Amalek is so vilified in our tradition because we are taught that he attacked the Israelites from the back, meaning he targeted the most vulnerable in our midst. But the Talmud says that what gave rise to the evil of Amalek was the fact that our community had failed to accept each other with care. Judaism has always understood that it is in moments of chaos that ultimately show us who we are, and as such, it continues to invite us to remember that the strongest antidotes to whatever threatens us will always be the power of hope, the power of love, the power of community. And the production of these healing salves is entirely in our own control.